So Dauntless Reforged just hit. There's a massive Slayer path. You see all of these options. You have no idea what to pick. You don't know where to even start. I'm gonna explain what you should be upgrading, what you should be ignoring entirely, and what you should leave for later on, whether you're a new player, a veteran player, someone trying to get a top score in trials. I'm going to go through every single node, explain everything, why you should take it and why you shouldn't. There will be timestamps included in the video if you want to skip to specific parts, specific segments. So if you're a new player, what you're going to want is first, start doing all of your quests. As you do these quests, you'll have the option to unlock new zones, new islands, new maps, different hunting grounds over time. This should be your absolute topmost priority, not any of the weapon nodes, not any of the bonus stamina recoveries, tonics, loadouts, weapons, anything. It should be the maps first, and when you get to the Slayer's armor, the glider, because it helps traverse through the maps a lot easier, and it's very recommended. Once you get to the 5th node, Light the Way, you can branch off to the left side and you'll have a variety of different weapon types and mods and specials related to said weapon types. Now some of these, as of the current patch, have incorrect tooltips. I will explain what they do anyways, so you know for future reference. But a lot of these are also considered what people will call fodder. They're just not recommended outright. I'll be going weapon by weapon, which mods to get, which specials to get, and why you shouldn't get certain ones. So starting with the sword, the very first weapon people start out with. You have the option to get Mending Blade Core in the beginning. Unfortunately, you have to go through these one by one, and Mending Blade Core is nice, a bit of extra recovery, never hurt anyone, but it's not that great, and there are better options down the line. Ardent Cyclone is probably the second best special. Valiant Overdrive, the special you start with on swords, is nice, but outclassed most of the time by Avenging Overdrive, which is gained through the Trial store. Ardent Cyclone is special. It does a lot of damage while being very easy to utilize. This is why I would highly recommend it, whether you're new or a veteran player. It comes in very handy for very lazy builds. Moving on to Recursive Hilt, this is my personal go-to mod when I play sword. Every blade rush that you do will grant you stamina and valor back. Now, stamina, I think it's self-explanatory. It's always needed for a variety of things, heavy attacks, dodging, and trying to sprint your way across maps, or to a behemoth. This will help you sustain your stamina a bit better, and will passively refund itself over time. It also comes in very handy when upkeeping your combo special meter, when in your special for Valiant Overdrive and Avenging Overdrive. Now, among all of these, I recommend all the way up to Recursive Hilt. The final one is Charged Sword Focus. This is situationally good. It is by far the highest damage mod for swords, but it requires very specific scenarios against very specific behemoths, like things like Skarn, for example. If you out DPS or out level them, you can stagger lock them and they don't move around much, making Charged Sword Focus good. But the moment you have a behemoth that moves too much all over the place, like Karabakh, this loses all of its use. If they're not inside the damage overtime effect when it explodes, you basically missed out on a bunch of damage. Which is why I would recommend leaving this for last unless you're a dedicated sword player and you absolutely have to have everything for it. Moving on to the axe. The axe requires a lot of knowledge about the behemoth, when you can attack, when you can't attack, because to get the most use out of an axe will require you to charge up its attacks. The first mod that you go through is Volatile Axe Core. It's a bit of extra damage, not the best but not the worst mod you can find. Grim Onslaught is the best axe special in the game. You start off with some axe mod, I don't even remember its name. It's pretty useless. It does mediocre damage at best, and it's annoying to use. Grim Onslaught, you throw the axe, you catch the axe. That's all there is to it, and it does a truckload of damage. I would highly recommend going through this. Lightweight Haft mod is mostly a convenient mod, kind of quality of life, but if you're looking to get the most bang for your buck, you would still go with the Volatile Axe Core as it's more damage, whereas this is just maintenance to your stamina pool. Finally, you have the overcharged cylinder mod. Since Hunt Grounds came out and you're constantly in a variety of fights, this has become by far the best mod for Axe. It pushes you from level 3 determination on Axe to level 4 determination, granting you an additional 25% free damage on pretty much everything you do with an Axe, making this by far the best in slot mod for Axe players, no matter what activity you do. So I would recommend, personally, if you're an Axe player, go through all of these nodes, especially to get the overcharged cylinder at the end. Moving on to the hammer, the highest damage dealing weapon in the game. Weighted Crown is the first mod you go through. Now this is situationally useful for behemoths where your Aether Slam, the explosions extend past the behemoth, so Weighted Crown can be nice to get that additional stagger damage and to stagger them more often or faster to begin with, but is definitely not the best mod for Hammer. Mighty Landbreaker is a special that is considered the absolute meta for Hammer. Very rarely is it switched out. This will grant you 20% damage bonus when you apply it with regular ammo, and 35% damage bonus whenever you apply it with the Aether charged ammo. This is basically just a chunk of damage for free for a single button click, and this can be applied to both you and your teammates if you decide to hold it down and apply several of these vents instead of one for just yourself. The Impulse Crown mod is unfortunately very gimmicky, clunky, and not that great overall. It'll grant you, if I remember correct, 10% damage bonus when you land a leap attack on a behemoth, and 20% if you strike the head specifically. This is very situational. Some of the time you can't even hit the head of the behemoth, and there's mods that are simply much easier to use and contribute far more. The mod that you're going to want to see on most of your hammer builds is Extended Clip. By default, hammers have 4 ammo, you're raising it to 6. This means more explosions from your Aether Slam, which translates to more damage, making this easily the best in slot. Most behemoths, you can get 5 if not 6 explosions on them. If the behemoth's a bit smaller, you can always prime specific hammer swings and then slam with a few less shells. Letting you prime the first couple of hits is also more damage. No matter how you use this mod, you'll end up getting higher damage than the other two competitors. This is why I recommend going through the full tree, getting every single mod and special here for hammers. Moving on to chainblades. The first mod you get is lightweight. It allows you to dodge towards a behemoth at the cost of 50% less stamina. This isn't recommended since you will most likely be running Reaper's Dance as your special, and that also has the option to pull you towards the behemoth, meaning you're gonna need to dodge towards the behemoth a lot less. The Cruel Wrist Strike special lacks both base damage, and the fact that it critically strikes does not make up for this, and it's also a lot clunkier to use than Reaper's Dance. So it being both clunkier and less damage than Reaper's Dance, there's no real reason to get or use this. Hurricane Blades mod, the devs unfortunately added the wrong tooltip, but what this does is it affects your triple light into heavy combo. When you extend the heavy portion of that combo and continue spinning your blades, the more hits that connect, the more stacks of a buff you get. This buff will allow follow-up attacks afterwards to deal increased damage. The Chainblade combo itself does not do a lot of damage, which is why it's not that recommended. It also drains stamina heavily, and if you don't have stamina to begin with, you can't even do the combo. So this mod isn't that great, and is outclassed by the next mod. Serrated Blades allows you to affect your double light heavy into light combo, which is considered the best and highest damage dealing combo in Chainblades. This will allow you to basically squeeze in some free critical strikes even if you don't have critical strike chance at all, whether it be from gear or mods or any kind of cell. This is going to be your end goal for Chainblades, and that means you're gonna have to go through the entire Chainblade tree to get to this. Moving on to Warpike. Warpike's first mod is the Munitions Amplifier mod. This mod isn't that great. It allows you to charge up your previously low quality ammo that was stored up to higher quality ammo over time. The time it takes to upgrade is extremely long, and you can get max quality ammo from 17% charge out of 20%, which is done in a single full light attack combo, so I can't really recommend getting or using this mod. Savage Wellspring, on the other hand, is a fantastic special, one of the most recommended specials in my opinion on Warpikes. As for Warpike specials in general, all three of them have their uses, but Savage Wellspring is the best team-related special. This will basically grant 25% critical strike chance to anyone who's near you, including yourself, and this is very easy to build up and maintain, so I would definitely recommend grabbing this if you're a Warpike player. After the Savage Wellspring special, you have Lightweight Shaft mod. This, much like the chainblades, have an incorrect tooltip and is taking something from hammers. What Lightweight Shaft does is when you hold down your sprint and you tap your light attack button, you will start charging with your Warpike. This will allow that charge to always crit and consume no stamina. This move is very gimmicky, clunky, and not really recommended at all. Needless to say, a mod revolving around this will be completely useless. Lastly, you have the Balanced Spearhead mod. This also has an incorrect tooltip. What the Balanced Spearhead mod does is when you differ between light attacks to heavy attacks and rotate between the two, you'll gain, if I remember correct, 3% damage up to a certain amount. Now, this doesn't help much, mostly because you're going to be wanting to do a specific combo that doesn't involve rotating between light and heavy attacks. I can only recommend up to Savage Wellspring, as the three mods you have here aren't that great to begin with. The mods I would recommend getting for Warpike later on are both in the trial store, unfortunately. Barbed Spearhead being for groups when you're trying to apply wounds a lot quicker, and Executioner's Spearhead in general, which is every time you wound a behemoth, which will happen quite often with a Warpike, you will gain 6% additional damage, up to 10 stacks. It doesn't mention it here, but 60% bonus damage is the cap. Moving on to repeaters. The first mod you get, not great. Reloading isn't that big of a deal, and you're gonna want empowered ammo instead of standard ammo, so this is pretty worthless. Full Bore Chamber, the absolute highest damage special you do have for repeaters. I would highly recommend getting this, since there's only going to be very few scenarios where other specials are going to be more recommended. Scoped sights, not that great. I wouldn't bother getting this. You're trying to reload next to the behemoth to get empowered ammo, so shooting from further away doesn't really help that much. Lucky Magazine is subjectively good in very niche scenarios, not enough for me to be able to justify its purchase, at least not early on. There are simply better mods that you can get from the trial store. When talking about trial store mods for repeaters, I am specifically referring to Tactician's Magazine, not Demolition Sights. Empowering your reload at exactly 0 ammo decreases the cooldown by 4 seconds on both of your abilities. You're going to be empowering your reloads anyways, you may as well just do it at 0 ammo and get off more abilities as a whole. Moving on to Strikers, the trial favored weapon. The first mod you have is Cyclonic Strike Plate. This is the best mod for Strikers in general, not just trials, but any Striker gameplay. This will extend your Tempest form by 10 additional seconds, and when you have 10 seconds or less left on Tempest form, this will grant you 15%, now it says damage, but specifically it means part damage, not all damage. Now, this is incredibly recommended because the more you have Tempest Form and Karma Breaker up, the less time you have to use to keep them up, and the more time you can spend using things like Adamant Bolt or Titan's Crash. Which, moving on after that, Titan's Crash. This is the preferred special for most people playing Strikers, and the reason being is the simple fact Adamant Bolt does no stagger damage, whereas this does a lot of stagger damage. And a behemoth that's knocked on its ass is going to be a lot easier to fight than one that's fighting you back. So I would recommend getting this. It's also a lot quicker in terms of the animation than Adamant Bolt, and requires very little aim. Echo Brace Driver was subjectively good for fights that lasted 30 seconds or less, due to not needing to refresh Tempest Form and Karma Breaker, but ever since the Reforged patch, we lost a bunch of power, so fights have started to last a lot longer, and this has lost a lot of its use over time, so I can't recommend it wholeheartedly, and I would just pass up on this. Inertial Fist Guard is a meme. Don't get it. Surge doesn't do that much damage. Buffing Surge will not save it. The movement speed is also incredibly irrelevant. You're next to the behemoth, you're not running around anywhere, so I wouldn't recommend this. If you're playing strikers, just go up to Titan's Crash, you don't need the last two. If you're a veteran player like me, and you just migrated from pre-reforged patch to post-reforged patch, you probably have a lot of this already upgraded or already unlocked. So here are the first few things that I recommend upgrading as soon as possible. The first thing being the glider upgrades. A lot of the game revolves currently around the hunting grounds and grinding in the hunting grounds. These glider upgrades will both boost the performance of the glider itself, meaning it'll take less stamina while you're flying it, and the lightweight frame will increase the speed and the distance it covers when flying on the glider. These aren't expensive upgrades, and they're universally useful in the hunting grounds, so I would recommend upgrading them as soon as humanly possible. The second thing I would recommend upgrading would be your favorite weapon or two. Not all of the weapon nodes here, but only your favorite weapon or two, so whenever you use them, you're gonna have about 15 extra power used with it, and 2% crit chance. It's a small additional bonus, but it's better than nothing, and the additional power will obviously help, especially when you're reforging the weapon later on. The third thing I would recommend is focusing primarily on one or two weapons, so you can get the reforged bonuses out of them. If you don't have a particular weapon you prefer, or you're trying to optimize the bonuses you get from the reforged passives, I would highly recommend starting with strikers because attack speed is universally good on every weapon, and then axe for the additional power, as that is also universally good on every weapon. Every other weapon has some useful stats that it grants, but they're not really sought out or even needed in a variety of cases. Things like weapon charge rate from sword only apply to a few of the weapons. They won't do anything, for example, on hammers or on repeaters. Additional stagger damage is nice, but it's not what people like to call real damage, not core damage. It won't kill the behemoth quicker, but it'll stagger it quicker. So it's nice to have, but not a main priority. This is why you should immediately just focus on strikers and then axe, or vice versa if you want to optimize it. If you have a really specific weapon you like, just focus on maxing it out until you have reforged it 10 times. After you forge it 10 times, I would recommend reforging a different weapon up to 10 times, because anything beyond 10 is just a portrait, it's purely cosmetic, it doesn't affect gameplay. If you don't care about these minor bonuses, it's not gonna make or break gameplay personally. The final thing I would recommend upgrading would be your preferred tonics. If you're trying to optimize specifically Frenzy first, then Blitz, then Aether Drive. I would only upgrade it on the first 4 nodes, because the 5th node simply adds an additional 1 carry. Previous nodes add much more useful effects, things like crafting an additional Frenzy tonic, making the tonic last for longer, and making the tonic stronger, with these last two being the main reason why we're getting these nodes. There's a cell in the game, Catalyst, that grants the same effects, and this is basically like having Catalyst equipped, but to a lesser extent, without taking up any cell slots, making them incredibly powerful to have. Most content in the game doesn't require you to use tonics, which is why this is still slated as one of the later options, in my opinion, to upgrade. If you just started out doing trials, or you've been trying to get the elusive Gold Crown or the Dauntless title for quite a while now, these are the things I would upgrade first if you're a trials player. The absolute first thing would be your Frenzy tonic up until the 4th node, mainly because you want the increased effectiveness of the Frenzy tonic and the increased duration of the Frenzy tonic. The additional chance to craft is not that concerning, but it's still welcomed, and the additional carry is pretty relevant. No trial is going to last long enough for you to use up all of your Frenzy tonics, not if you're going for a top score at least. The same can be said for the Blitz tonic. You're going to want to upgrade it up until the 4th node for the increased effectiveness and the increased duration. Last but not least, you're going to want to do the absolute same thing for the Aether Drive Tonic all the way up until the 4th node. I personally not done it yet, but will be doing it as soon as possible. More so often than not, you will be using Aether Drive Tonic in trials as your 3rd potion instead of things like the Assault Tonic or the Inspiring Pylon. The Inspiring Pylon is more often used in groups, rarely is it used in solos. And even when it is used in solos, it only slightly passes Aether Drive Tonics. After leveling up all of the tonics and consumables of your choice for trials, I would recommend the weapon that you're going to use the most in trials, start leveling that up, squeeze out as much damage potential as you can, with the additional power gains all the way to the end. The 2% crit chance is nice, not too necessary, not too mandatory. You don't want to be relying on RNG for fast clears, whereas power is just flat extra damage. So you want to prioritize getting to the very end of whichever weapon you prefer. With all of that being said, there are a few nodes that I recommend entirely against. They're not relevant for any kind of player, and you should avoid them at all costs unless you A, finish all the relevant nodes and the useful nodes, or B, have nothing to do and just want to max out everything. Otherwise, don't level these up. They're a waste of materials in my opinion. They provide very minor benefits for very little to nothing worthwhile. The first ones are going to be all of these nodes. Concussive Grenade is more or less the only useful item out of all of these items, and you don't really need it to craft additional grenades or have the grenade effect for longer. It boops the behemoth immediately, interrupts it, and that's all you need. You're not using it for damage or anything of that sort. The grenade damage from the rest of these grenades or the healing from transfusion grenades is not worth it, and airstrike beacons are definitely not worth it, so don't bother leveling up any of these. The second cluster of nodes that I would recommend avoiding are the resistances. They're deceptively useful. Additional shock resistance is not going to stop a shock orb from Stormclaw from taking away most if not all of your health when it's a higher level than you. And the game heavily encourages you to simply dodge things, which means you're not going to take any damage to begin with, so additional resistance means little to nothing. If you're a migrated player from before the reforged patch, you should have gotten everything besides terror resistance for some reason. These resistances won't help at all. There's no reason to level them. Whatever is going to one-shot you is going to one-shot you even if you max out everything here. So there's no point in leveling these only until much later on to minimize damage from things that definitely won't one-shot you, like the Umbral Goo that Shroud throws. Additional Umbral resistance can be nice to make the damage a tiny bit less, but it's not going to make a wild difference, and it never will. The final set of nodes that I want to recommend avoiding are the Stamina and Bulwark nodes. These consumables aren't that great to begin with. Leveling them up, even if it's an additional chance to craft, make them last longer, or increase their effectiveness, none of these things are useful if the consumable itself is not that useful. Additional health pots might be nice, but usually if you require more than the 5 health pots for the activity they give you, even if it's a prolonged activity, the odds are that the additional few that you can carry or the additional bit of healing that you're going to get is not going to make a big difference. The extra consumable slots are, if anything, the best thing in this entire set here. Besides the consumables mentioned above being pretty subpar compared to Blitz and Frenzy Tonic, the options here, these nodes, if you are a migrated player, then you'll have the additional health and you'll have the additional stamina, but you won't have any of these new nodes like increased stamina regeneration or increased healing. At best I would recommend the stamina regeneration, but even then it's more of a quality of life thing. A lot of moves don't require stamina to begin with, and stamina management without these nodes isn't that hard to begin with. I personally started leveling these because I find nothing better for myself personally to level. The additional healing is very, very low for the cost, and I would not recommend it, period, unless you really have nothing else to level. Thank you all for watching. If you reached this point at the end of the video, I'm amazed. The video is probably going to come out long as hell. If you skip to here, whatever, that works too. If you want any kind of specific guide or you want me to talk about some specific meta, how to optimize a certain thing in the game, please write in the comments below. I do read absolutely every single comment, even replies to comments.